Hi, Donald here with Floating Feathers Kayak Fly Fishing School with another tips and tricks. And this tips and tricks is on fly line leaders. And I'm going to try to explain as much as I can about all this in this video. So I'm going to break this down into 4 parts. Okay, so the 4 parts of a leader, or what do you need to know about fly line leaders. First part we're going to talk about is taper. Next is materials, then length, and then the size of the leader itself and how to figure that out and what it all means. So we're going to decode that in just a few minutes. First, I want to talk about taper. So what in a fly line, in a fly leader, what is taper and what is the purpose? So taper is just that. It is bigger at one end and gradually gets smaller at the other end. So the bigger end attaches to your fly line and the smaller or lighter end attaches to the fly or your tippet. Most manufacturer leaders like these that are chemically manufactured usually are naturally tapered, and they don't have any knots in them, which means the only knot is at the end where it attaches to your fly line, and usually that's kind of a loop connector. On most modern leaders have a loop, so you can loop it right onto your fly line, and then there is no knot anywhere in that fly leader, so you can tie your fly directly to that, and then when that butt section ends off or wears out, or you cut it off, then you can attach your tippet. So that is what a taper is. There are man-made leaders out there, and they have a taper as well, but it's very difficult for a man-made leader to have a mechanical taper or a chemical taper to it, because it's a very precise process, and it just involves a little bit too much machinery. So man-made leaders are going to have 3 to 4 different diameters or pound tests of fluorocarbon or mono. We'll talk about the materials in just a moment, but the man-made leaders are going to have those sections tied together with nail knots or something similar, and they're going to start with one heavy thing, right? So let's say 20 pound, then they're going to go to a 15 pound, and then a 12 pound, and then a 10 pound or something like that. So over the length of the leader, there'll be 3 or 4 sections in there, and each section is just a little bit lighter than the first section, which still gets you that taper, fat on one end, skinny on the other, or heavy on one end, light on the other. So that is a taper, okay? And the importance of a taper is to allow the heavier end of the leader to hit first, and then it expands and lets the lighter end of that tapered leader to fold out, right? Remember the candy cane thing, right? When you loop, allows that tapered leader, the light end of that tapered leader, to fold out and present the fly in as gentle manner as possible. So that is why fly line leaders are tapered. Next thing we're going to talk about is materials. And there are 2 most common materials in fly line leaders today, and that is fluorocarbon and nylon. Okay, so nylon is probably the most common. Fluorocarbon is probably follows really close to that, depending on whether you're fishing saltwater or freshwater, or you're fishing sinking flies or floating flies. And I'll get into that in just a moment. So nylon leaders, they're probably the most common you're going to see out here. This has to be one from Orvis, but it's a nylon is all the material is. Nylon, it's the least expensive, so they're probably going to be the cheapest leaders you can find are made of nylon. They're actually really durable. Nylon is a pretty durable material, so they'll last you a long time. It floats, it will float for most of the time, so it's great to use with dry flies or with poppers, hoppers, things like that you want on surface flies. One of the drawbacks about nylon is that it can still be seen. It's not quite invisible underneath the water, so it still can be seen. So if you have finicky fish, you may not want to use nylon leaders, which brings us to fluorocarbon. Okay, so fluorocarbon is a little bit heavier of a material. It's a little bit stronger. It sinks because of its added weight over nylon, or increased weight over nylon. It's not quite as durable as the nylon leaders are, so you'll probably replace these a little bit more. However, these are nearly invisible in the water to the fish. So when you tie your fly on to a fluorocarbon leader, if you've got finicky fish, they're less likely to see the leader material attached to that fly. So finicky fish or fluorocarbon. And if you want this to float, even though fluorocarbon leaders are designed to sink, you can help this float or maybe just reduce the sink rate as long as possible by adding something like a silicone floatant or fly line floatant to your leader, and that will help your fluorocarbon leader float just a little bit longer. So there's another little tips and tricks inside those tips and tricks. The next thing I'm going to talk about is length, and the most common lengths you're going to see is 7.5 foot and 9 foot, but they'll go all the way up to 15 foot. I think I have 10 foot, 12 foot, and 15 foot leaders. So difference between short leader and long leader. A short leader, or let me back up just a moment. The length of the leader is going to determine how far away from the fly line your fly lands, right? Makes sense. If you have your fly tied on to the end of a 15-foot leader, it's going to land, hopefully, 15 feet from where your fly line ends. If you have your fly tied onto a 7.5-foot leader, it's going to land, hopefully, 7.5 feet from where your fly line lands. So if you have very, very spooky fish, or you're on very still waters, very still, calm waters, and you want to get that fly away from the disturbance on the water that the fly line will make, or where the fly line and the heavy end of the leader will make contact with the water, you use a longer leader. That will get your fly farther away from the disturbance in the water caused by the impact of the fly line and or heavy end of the leader. If you're not worried about that, if you don't have finicky fish, or if you're in moving water, you can use a little shorter leader. The advantage to a shorter leader over a longer leader is that it actually helps you control your loops a little bit better, or maintain loop control. So if you're starting out fly fishing, if you're just taking casting lessons, or if you contact me and we take you out for fly casting lessons, I will have you using a 7.5-foot leader because you're able to control the loops better with a shorter leader than you are with a longer leader. So if you find yourself out there and you've just started fly fishing, you've only been fly fishing for a little bit, and you're having trouble maintaining loop control, shorten your leader for a little while. Practice your technique, get it down, get those loops correct with a 7.5-foot leader, and then you can start expanding that length. So once you get that technique down and you got a good loop in your 7.5-foot leader, you'll be able to get the loop better and better and maintain that loop control in your longer leaders. So that is advantages and disadvantages of both the longer and shorter lengths of your leader. One other thing on lengths of leader, it has really nothing to do with the length of rod you're using, all right? And you don't necessarily have to use a 7.5-foot leader, and that's where you got to tie your fly on. You can always add your tippet to the end of your leader and increase that length of that leader plus the tippet. So if you want to fish 15 feet away from your fly line and all you have is 7.5-foot leaders, you can add 7.5 foot of tippet and bam, 15 feet away from your fly line. You're welcome. All right, so there's your taper, materials, and length. So now we're going to talk about size. And this is probably one of the more difficult things to kind of figure out when you first start fly fishing is what is size, right? So this is a 0x, I've got a 5x, 3x, right? 3x, what is an X? Okay, so X rating, yes, it does have something to do with the pound test. Yeah, and on average, or most manufacturers are pretty close to range of the pound test that the X rating is. But don't get confused, or don't think that an X rating is there just simply for pound test rating. Okay, it's there to help you determine what size of fly to use with that leader. The right size of fly with the right size of leader will not only help you get the fly where you want it, it will help you maintain presentation and control of that fly. So you'll be able to present that a lot easier without making big splashes, and you'll be able to control exactly where you want that to go better. So, X numbers. There's a formula out there that works pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to use, let's go with the 5X for example. Okay, so whatever this X number rating is, and as you can see, that's a 5X right there, hopefully, 5X. You take whatever the X number is and multiply it by 3. So a 5X times 3. 5 times 3 is 15, right? So what does that mean? That times 3 is going to give you the size range of fly that you can use with this rated leader. So a 5X leader like this one times 3 is 15. So you can use this with a size 15 fly and just a little bit smaller than that, but nothing bigger. Okay, that's the maximum size of fly you can use, a size 15. Okay, so with a 5X, you can probably go down to about a size 20, maybe 18 to 20, maybe a 22, but that might be pushing it. So I'd go 15 to 18 with the 5X rating. If you want to go to an 18 to 22 or a 24 or a 26, you'd probably have to get a 6X, because 6 times 3, 18. You got it. So nothing bigger than whatever this number is times 3. Now, so if I got a 3X, right, 3 times 3 is 9, right? If I got a 2X, 2 times 3 is 6, so a size 6 fly, probably about a size 6 to size 4. Now, if you remember just a moment ago, I talked about this little bugger right here. This little bugger right here is a 0X. 0 times 3 is what? 0. What are you going to use, a 0 size fly? Actually, sort of, yes. But there is no 0 size fly, right? So we're just going to drop that down to a size 1. And then you can just change this 0 on this 0X to a 1 and get kind of the same formula. So 1 times 3 is 3. So the smallest fly you want to use on this, right, on the 0X, right, just change that, pretend this is a 1, right, or you can just pretend 0 times 3 is 0, and there's no 0 size fly, so you can go up or down 1 fly size or 1 hook size. So I'll just go down to a size 1. So I will use a size 1 to about a size 2-aught, maybe 3-aught on this, and that's about it. I don't want to go any heavier than that. It depends on saltwater flies and the bulkiness of the flies. That's the 0X is kind of tricky, but there is your formula. Okay, so X is times 3, and that helps you figure out the size of fly that you can use with that leader. Now, what is the problem with using a big fly on a smaller leader, right? So if I have, say, a size 4 a fly, and I want to use it on a 5X. Well, it's a little too big for that leader, because the leader is designed for a smaller fly. What's going to happen is that the leader can't quite churn over the fly, because it's not designed to churn over that heavy or that big or that much weight on the other end. So while you may get the fly line out there, the leader is going to hit, but it's not going to deliver your fly where you want it to. So your presentation is just going to be all over the place. It's not going to cast to, it's probably going to fall to the left, to the right. It's just not going to go exactly where you want that fly to go. Okay, on the opposite end of that spectrum, if you use too small a fly on too big of leader, so if I've got a 0X and I'm putting a size 22 fly on there, probably not going to be able to do that just because of the fact that the diameter of the fly line, the diameter of the leader. But I'm just using that for example. Let's say I'm using a 0X and I want to use it on a size 10 fly. Okay, you're going to be able to put the fly out there. You're going to be able to probably put it where you want to put the fly. The issue becomes, because that fly leader is so heavy, it's going to create so much disturbance when it makes contact with the water. It's probably not going to matter if you're accurate with your delivery or not, because it's going to spook the fish. So that is the importance of matching your X rating to the size of the fly that you're trying to throw, or that you're throwing to try to catch the fish. Okay, so that is taper, materials, length, size, right, X rating, okay. If you have any questions, please post them below. I'll try to answer them as quickly and as accurately and efficiently as I can. I know this is kind of a convoluted subject, but I tried to wrap this up in a nice little nutshell as best I can. If you haven't subscribed, please find the subscribe button, click below. If it was over here, it may have changed. This is 2020. YouTube may redesign their entire set yet, but right now it should be right there. Please hit that subscribe button. And tune in every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central for more tips and tricks right here on the Floating Feathers Kayak Fly Fishing School channel. I have been Donald. Thank you all for watching. And until next time, tight lines and safe paddles.